Perfect. Always a technical difficulty with these things, but yes, these webinars are recorded and they'll be uploaded to our City of Kalamazoo YouTube page for future reference. So if you're attending and you know somebody that wasn't able to attend, please, once the video is uploaded to our YouTube page, please share it with people so that they can go back and watch and find the right project page, or maybe ask 311 if there's any questions about a project. So without further ado, I'm going to keep this moving. Just some housekeeping stuff. Some of you may have been on these webinars previously, but I just mentioned it. It's recorded, right, and put on our YouTube channel. The city's also got a really useful website with a nice keyword search bar at the top. And we have lots of project pages related to some of these big transportation projects. And what you can do on those pages is actually subscribe to receive updates to those project pages. So you can see there's an announcement box here. When announcements are posted, maybe they're progress updates on a project, you should get an email for just that project that you're subscribed to provide updates that way. And of course, you can always check out our social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, because we do share updates there a lot. So, and then of course we have our 311 page, which I recommend to everybody. If you have any non-emergency type questions related to a project, 311 is a great way. It's a great tool to get connected with the city and then potentially get connected if needed to the right staff person. So it's really a useful tool to help save time and resources. Okay, into some of the nitty-gritty. And this is all going to be super high level because we've kind of tracked some of these projects over the past year. But just as a reminder, some of the big projects that have been happening around the city. So in 2024, we had the finishing up of Ransom Street, which was a water main project and a pretty major reconstruction of the street. On a similar note, we had Westnedge Avenue, water main and reconstruction, and White's Road, water main and reconstruction. White's Road is fully complete at this point. Westnedge Avenue is still ongoing, but is still slated to be complete. I believe before the end of November. I know, Tom, if you're on the call and want to add more context to Westnedge, if you have it, you're more than welcome to.
Not too much more to add. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously, it's open to the traffic in a limited capacity, but it is getting there, and I believe it's supposed to be wrapping up in the next 2 weeks.
Oh, I see. Hold on a second. There we go. Dennis, was there something you wanted to add about Westnedge Avenue? Okay. We've also this year had Mishkal Street, which is a Streets for All project, and Streets for All is different than Safe Streets for All. Streets for All is the moniker. It's what we're using when we're talking about all of our jurisdictional transfer street projects. So those are our major one-way to two-way conversion projects in and around the downtown area. So Mishkal is actually wasn't the first project in that huge slate of work that we have upcoming, but it was the start of the work that's coming to Kalamazoo Ave, because it's wrapped up in that project. We also had the Inkster Avenue Bridge the old bridge demolition and reconstruction and reopening, which has been great. We've had some regular maintenance work on Riverview Drive with some resurfacing and some additional pedestrian safety improvements like enhanced crossings. We've had a similar type of work happen on Howard Street. Um, and we've also had some water main work on Balch Street, which is actually probably wrapping up soon as well. Um, and then a big area in the downtown is in and around where the future event center will be located, and that is a lot of upgrading underground utilities, just in preparation of and in alignment with a lot of the bigger projects that are going to be coming to downtown alongside the event center work. And then the other thing to talk about today, and we'll get to that in a little bit here, is the actual Safe Streets for All, the federal program that our consultants are going to talk about. We've been putting in some pilot projects throughout the city or aimed at calming traffic down. And we have some good pictures of some of these projects all wrapped up. So some of them wrapped up earlier in the year, some of them take a full year to actually complete. So with Michical Street and Ransom Street as an example, um, Michical didn't take as long as Ransom, but Ransom Street was a full reconstruction, so that is underground and above ground. So that takes usually our full construction season. Michical went pretty fast. That was more of a lot of surface level improvements. You can see there's trees planted. Um, there's a really nice wide shared use path that you can see as well. Riverview Drive had some resurfacing and paint work done, and you can see some of the crossings that were put in or re-emphasized, some signage as well. Inkster Bridge, of course, that one long awaited and has now been constructed. And then this is an example, the SS4A pilot project. So this is an example of what one of those pilot traffic calming projects looks like. So this is a pedestrian island crossing on Maple Street. And those pilot projects have been citywide installs. And then, of course, Westnedge Avenue, which has been kind of the big one this year alongside White's Road. Just kind of giving the scope of how much infrastructure was changed in those on those roads. You know, when we're talking about water main replacement, it's a really long process, but the benefit is that we hopefully won't have to um, dig those roads back up again in the near future at all. So this has really been a huge step forward in terms of, you know, the history of deferred maintenance with these types of projects and just really needing to upgrade our underground utilities. So it's a long process, takes a lot of time and energy and resources, but it's a net positive. And then we've also installed some traffic calming tools and as well as adding some non-motorized facilities in the city. So Level Street's a good example. That's wrapped up in our Safe Streets for All program, but it's also called out in the Vine neighborhood plan, and there was some good support from residents along Level Street, especially on the west end, as you get closer to Oakland Drive and Stadium, on finding some way or trying, you know, in support of the cycle track as a way to help calm traffic a bit and also provide some resources for folks who maybe can't travel using a car, but can either via bike or, you know, potentially walking. So, and all that to say, kind of transition into the big topic for today is the Safe Streets for All work that the city has taken on. So back in 2023, we were awarded some federal grant dollars to kind of take a two-pronged approach. The first prong, I guess, was implementation of our pilot projects, which I mentioned. So that's the Level Street cycle track, Stadium Drive cycle track. And then we've got mid-block crossings, speed humps, and mini traffic circles all throughout the city. So as an example, we had quite a bit of mini traffic circles installed at some pretty wide intersections in the Edison neighborhood where there's been a lot of evidence of, a driving behavior like spinning out in the intersections and speeding. And so that's been a really successful installation. We've been getting support for more traffic calming in some of these areas just based on resident observations. But all this work is really tied to this safe system approach, which is sort of an evolution of a lot of the Vision Zero work that started, many, many years ago. And so one prong of all this is the pilot projects, and the other prong is working on a safety action plan for the city of Kalamazoo. And to help us get this safety action plan, I'm gonna hand it off to our lovely consultants from AECOM and uh, Alta to introduce themselves and walk us through, what that safety action plan is going to look like.
All right, thank you, Nolan. I'll jump in. My name is Matthew Deardahl. I'm a senior planning associate with Alta Planning and Design. Pam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Pam Blazel. I am a senior traffic safety engineer with the AECOM office out of Grand Rapids.
All right, and so AECOM and Alta are teaming to deliver separate parts of the safety action plan. And we are working together as a coordinated team with Nolan and the city of Kalamazoo. And we are just very excited for this. I think this is an exciting time for the plan and a great time to be on this webinar. I will note that the most important part of this presentation will be at the end, where we share our survey and web map. We're really entering an early public engagement phase right now, sort of kicking it off. And so we want to get as many people as possible to take the survey and share thoughts in the web map. So share it with your friends. It's nice that this will be it's nice that this is being recorded and will be on the website, so people can do that in the coming weeks. So on the next slide, we'll just give a quick overview of topics. Kind of did introductions already. And then we'll get into safety planning at a high level and then discuss the specifics of this project, and then ends with some more thoughts on how people can get involved. So again, this is the team. Alta will be leading the overall bringing together the safety action plan, and then AECOM will be doing a few different components that we'll talk about, and then Alta is doing a few different components. So we'll get into that in a minute. Yep, so here's a bit of the structure of the project, which I sort of started to describe. So you can see on the left, on the bottom, there's 6 components. So the far left is a safety action plan. That'll be bringing all of the engagement, safety analysis, and then each of these 5 components together into a single plan. And so those 5 components from left to right are the intersection upgrade safety improvement plan and the pedestrian safety improvement plan. And what that basically means is we're going to be exploring and analyzing crashes and crash trends, both at all types or all modes at intersection. So modes, I mean walking, biking, and driving. And then specifically, we're going to dig a bit deeper into pedestrian safety. So people walking and getting into crashes. So what's happening? What are the trends? That type of thing. And then AECOM will lead the sidewalk, lighting, and bus stop safety improvement plan. And Pam will describe those in a bit more detail in a minute. So on the next slide, why safety action plan? Nolan talked about it a bit. Safety has been a top priority at the federal level for a number of years now, and a significant amount of funding has been sort of earmarked to address safety. So an action plan like the one that we're pursuing here is often required to obtain infrastructure grants. And so that's really important. But this process will also help the city of Kalamazoo tackle safety issues in a comprehensive and strategic way. And then here's so just some national statistics. You can see them on the screen. Crashes are a major issue. That's the main takeaway. It's particularly concerning when crashes lead to death or significantly alter the lives of people. And that's one of the big things that the Safe Systems approach leans in on, is that people are going to make mistakes. We don't necessarily feel we can prevent people from making mistakes, but we don't want it to ruin lives. We are also very interested in the most vulnerable road users. So that means people walking, biking, and rolling on our streets. And then on the next slide are some Michigan statistics. And the point here is so many crashes, right? 287, 953 reported crashes. This is, I believe, is in 2023. 1,021 were fatal. Bicyclist death toll was 24, pedestrian 183. So a lot of crashes that we want to prevent. And then moving into Kalamazoo statistics, we'll just highlight here 23 people killed, 3 of them walking. And the idea with these Safe Streets for All efforts is that 0 deaths are acceptable on our streets, and we want to work to prevent them in the future. So on the next slide, why is this happening? That's partly what we're going to figure out. So this process will include some significant analysis of crash data and others. And so that's essentially what we're here to figure out. But we generally know that speed is a major factor in crashes, especially crashes that lead to serious injuries. We also know that we often overbuild streets, and I mean across the country, in order to move cars efficiently. And so again, that's what we're exploring here, and finding ways to address it. And then this has been touched on a little bit, but there has been unprecedented, yeah, you can go to the federal funding. There has been unprecedented federal funding for safety work, and there's a variety of types. So this project falls into the Safe Streets and Roads for All. You can see the other grants on the screen. So RAISE grants, Reconnecting Communities, Transportation Alternatives, and then there's other connections like Safe Routes to School and things like that that are part of this. So now we'll move into the project overview. On this slide here, we'll take a moment to give a brief overview of each of the 5 components to give you a sense of what we'll be exploring in the overall safety action plan. And then, so on the next slide, I mentioned before, there's 2 types that Alta is going to be tackling. This first one is going to be focused on intersections and all modes. So again, people walking, biking, and driving, and crashes that are happening. We're going to take a look at the top 200 intersections for crashes, really try to get an understanding of what's happening, and then pairing specific countermeasures or improvements, to simplify that, to what's happening. So that is the first plan. And then the second one, we'll be digging in again on pedestrian safety. Part of this plan will include a pedestrian level of traffic stress, which will basically be analyzing all of the streets in the city and identify where it feels really safe and comfortable to walk and where it may not feel safe and comfortable to walk. And we'll do that by looking at a lot of data, number of travel lanes, speed limits, presence of sidewalks, things like that. And now I've been talking a lot. I will turn it over to Pam to talk about AECOM's plans.
All right, thanks, Matthew. Yeah, so our first plan, we're doing 3 separate plans and analyses. And our first one is the sidewalk safety improvement plan. So this kind of works in conjunction with that pedestrian safety that Alta is working on. But we're identifying where are those safe, sidewalk gaps out there in the network, and looking at them in relationship to crashes as well, where are pedestrian and bicycle crashes, especially on those corridors. If there's not separate dedicated bike facilities, we know that most of those bicyclists are out on the sidewalks at that point. So where are some of those gaps? How does it relate to the crashes? But then also, how does it relate to some of the major destinations where people are trying to get to? So neighborhood parks, things like that, the downtown areas. So just trying to help kind of build that network so the city can prioritize where to fill those gaps in first with some of that unprecedented funding that Matthew was talking about. And then on the next slide, our second plan that we will be looking at AECOM is a lighting study improvement. So we do have some data we've received already at this point from Consumers Energy, but looking at what is the existing lighting out there on the roadways, both from a street level lighting, but also pedestrian scale lighting. So some of those not as tall, like those lower level lighting fixtures that are designed to light the sidewalk, to light those pedestrian crossing locations. So looking at it from that standpoint, also comparing that to the crashes that have happened that are happening under dark conditions, both dark unlit, where there is no existing lighting, but also dark lighted conditions as well, and looking at the type of lighting on those corridors to see if there's any recommended improvements that the city can work with the different utilities for. And then our third plan that we're working on is a transit bus stop improvement plan. So with this, we're looking at a number of factors with the existing transit stops that are out there and trying to help prioritize where to increase amenities and or make any changes to the stops themselves or the access to get to those stops. So this goes back and ties in both the sidewalk access to these facilities, lighting, are there existing amenities or amenities that are needed at some of these high priority locations in terms of benches, shelters, things along those lines. So we're going to look at a number of factors, both from a ridership standpoint of where are the most highly utilized stops that are out there, and then back to, again, kind of those vulnerable road users that Matthew's talking about and the bike pedestrian crashes that are happening on some of those routes and helping prioritize those so the city can tackle that with that funding.
All right, so our approach overall to the project, we're again starting now with an effort to hear from residents, so you all, and some other engagement activities. And then we'll get into some of that complicated analysis that we've been talking about, understand what's going on with crashes. And then from there, we want to identify solutions that are specifically connected to what we learn, both in the engagement phase and the safety analysis. And then finally identify specific projects that can be implemented in different timeframes, as well as assist in finding opportunities to fund the projects. A little bit on timeline on the next slide. Again, kicking off the project now, lots of engagement and analysis work happening over the winter. And then in the spring, we're looking forward to a public webinar to share what we've found so far and some recommendations. And then we'll move into a draft of the plans and wrap up in the fall. So engagement at a high level, we have a safety task force made up that is helping guide the project. We've talked about a few times the online survey input map. There will be some stakeholder meetings and public meetings, pop-up events, and then again, the project webpage and social media efforts. So a lot of different ways to connect on this project. Moving on to one more slide after this. So yeah, next steps again, digging into community engagement and the analysis. And then finally, we have these QR codes for the survey and the input map. So if you're not familiar with QR codes, basically you can take out your phone and open up your camera and hover on each of these boxes, and a link should pop up that will take you to the survey and the input map. And I believe Nolan said that this will also be on the city's website.
Yep, that's correct. So we'll be making sure that we get these links up online on our project page for the Safe Streets for All work. There's already been some updates. We've kind of transitioned away from we've got highlights on those pilot projects that are throughout the city right now, and really those are temporary projects kind of on a 3-year time span. And we'll be collecting data on crashes and speeds with those in place, right? And then we'll be using that and feeding that into this planning document as well. So basically, and I know it was touched on a bit, but the end goal is that, the Safe Streets for All federal program starts with this type of work. And then once the document is kind of in a final draft form, like Matthew and Pam suggested on the timeline slide, it would also need to be looked at and reviewed by City Commission, and then it would be, adopted by City Commission. And that this document would kind of be one of our major guiding documents for safety improvements. And then it also, back to the federal program, it helps us unlock more financial resources to maybe make some of those pilot projects permanent, or looking at other locations to prioritize for different types of improvements. So this document, all the technical analysis aspects and community engagement and input will help us prioritize, like Matthew was saying, Pam was saying, our some of our most dangerous intersections, or it'll be more specific because we'll be taking into account things like land use, right? Some of those contextual factors that Matthew mentioned at the beginning. And so, the QR code for the survey, it's kind of a conventional, survey, right? With multiple choice questions, different types of questions like that. But I also highly encourage folks to look at and definitely look at the input map survey. So that's actually where you can select different categories that will connect to the different, chapters essentially of the plan. So, right, if you're looking at, hey, I know this intersection has some issues I want to highlight, maybe you walk that intersection every day, or when you're taking your dog for a walk, or maybe you ride in a certain part of town, or you drive by an intersection and it doesn't quite, you feel like there could be improvements, then you're able to actually put a pin on a map and provide comments. And that is a really helpful exercise to actually get data that is, spatial inputs from, people's experiences on the ground. And the actual sort of normal type survey focuses a bit more on some of the aspects of, frequency, like mode usage, right? So frequency, how often do you bike, walk, drive, right? How does it feel? It's more higher level like that, but I think the input map is really kind of the nitty gritty, really get into like pinpointing, helping pinpoint certain areas of the city that, really could feed into this and help us look at different solutions to improve safety in those areas. And this is the actual link to our project page for our Safe Streets for All program. Like I said, this was just updated. I think in the next week or so, we'll make sure we can get this recording linked on there, and get the survey information up there before the end of this week. So that's available on the website, and then definitely share with friends, family, anyone in the city that you know that would be interested. Any and all folks that want to provide input, we welcome that. And I didn't know if there was any questions that came in or if other city staff wanted to provide any input. Dennis, I know you should be a panelist now, so I saw you raise your hand earlier. I didn't know if that was just to let me know that you were there and needed to be a panelist, or if you had something to add.
No, I just, the only thing I'd add, Nolan, is that, you know, that this process ties into work we've been doing the last several years. It gives us even greater information about what's happening. And when we say safety, we really mean keeping people from being killed and hurt, from having their properties damaged. That's our focus here, to try to make the city more livable by making it safer for people. And I don't think we can highlight that enough for folks to understand that we're not just trying to slow people down for the heck of it, but we have a real objective. We want people to be safe and to have good lives and to live in a really nice place. And that's where this is all going.
Yeah, appreciate that, Dennis. I know that we some of the national trends have kind of shown that as vehicle technology has, you know, gotten better and better over time, and there's been certain laws around monitoring vehicle manufacturer and safety standards, that your likelihood of fatal injuries in a car crash, if you're within a car, are much lower than they were. But the opposite trend has been happening with, you know, the size of vehicles getting bigger. EV vehicles especially are much heavier and often larger. There's been an increase in pedestrian deaths. So the likelihood is kind of flip-flopped. So, you know, the national trends and these programs at the federal level are really focusing on, like it was mentioned before, you know, we're designing these spaces to be safe for, you know, basically what you'd say kind of is the most at-risk, kind of lowest common denominator, you know, older folks, kids, right? People with that need ADA accessibility and might have some impairments that make navigating intersections or a network potentially more hazardous. And so if we design for them, then everyone benefits. So let's see if there, I don't know if there's any questions. All right. Well, it doesn't look like there's any questions. As I mentioned previously, we're gonna have this information available online. And please share widely. You know, we're gonna be posting soon as well on our social media, kind of as we launch the different surveys that we have for this work. And I know we've got a lot of different surveys going around and different work that we're doing right now. So if anyone does ask, you know, Safe Streets for All is the federal program that we talked about today. Streets for All is kind of our local branding for our big downtown projects. So little nuance there, but again, if anyone has any extra questions, feel free to reach out to 311 or check out our project pages online. And either way, we'll try and get answers for questions. So, all right. Thank you, everybody.